Hey, folks. Things got a little quiet in my ears there for a second. Hey, folks. Uh-oh. This is the
Things got a
old...
little quiet in my ears there.
Yeah. Can you all hear me out there? I see some... I see some eyeballs. Come leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. Let me see where you're watching from. Good evening, folks. Got some Melrose in the house. That's our hometown here. The Melrose UU Church is the subsidizer, the base subsidizer of this series called Opening Doors, Race, Conversation, and Song. Kyle from Philly, you win longest away for right now. Ann in Dorchester. Donnie Atkins, you're out of town too. Good to see y'all. Thanks for tuning in. This is the second season of Opening Doors. We started last year. We had 3 concerts, which were fantastic. We started with an old friend of mine, Vance Gilbert. Then we had Dan Zanes and Claudia Zanes, and then Reese Palmer. We took the summer off, and we're back now with season 2. And we have a very exciting lineup. And when I thought about who would be a person that we could start off with, somebody I've known a long time, although I haven't known her all that well. We've known each other a long time, and we're getting to know each other better. She's somebody I really admire. I love her music. I love playing with her and being in her presence. Her name is Pamela Means. She's a songwriter originally from Milwaukee, who's been in the Boston area for many years, has been out in Western Mass for the last a couple of decades. I'll ask her about that. And when I first arrived in Boston and started playing the coffee houses and folk clubs, Pamela was already a mainstay in those clubs. So I'm very excited to see her and talk with her and learn from her today. Please welcome my old friend Pamela Means.
Hey, Mook.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
Good. Let's be careful how we throw around those words old and decades, shall we?
We were so young when we both arrived here.
We're babies.
When did you get to Boston?
94.
Oh, so you were just a year ahead of me. I got here in 95. But your star was rising already when I got here. You were well known to me.
By 95, I definitely was doing sound and hosting an open mic at the Kendall Cafe and in Cambridge. And I met probably met you there and most of my singer-songwriter friends. I feel like every year a generation of musicians moves to a town, and then we're like the school class of that year. So we've all,
It really feels that way, especially in retrospect, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You came here directly from Milwaukee, or was there somewhere in between?
No, directly from Milwaukee. My friend Peter Mulvey moved first, a couple years ahead of me, and kept telling me how great it was. And I was scared to leave town, but I also was feeling the urge that I had to do something, and I wasn't to continue to grow as an artist. And so I went for a visit, and I moved 6 months later.
Were you already, so you and Peter were already playing on the Milwaukee scene? Was there a folk scene in
Yeah,
Milwaukee?
There was just not a folk scene. It was too small. There's just like an scene and a handful of clubs that
Hmm.
all genres played. I mean, there were a couple folk clubs. I first played an open mic at a place called the Coffee House, the only church basement coffee house in Milwaukee,
Hmm.
at that time anyway. And Peter was went to Marquette and was in a college band, so he wasn't really doing folky thing. He was packing the clubs with his band Big Sky, and I opened a lot of bar shows for them, and yeah, so I
Solo? You were solo at the time?
was solo at the time. Yeah, been solo most of the time.
But until recently, we'll talk a little bit about your recent band,
Mm-hmm.
right? When okay,
Still
well,
solo. I mean, I think of my I'm solo. I'm solo, but and I just have projects, and I can
okay,
call players. Yeah, yeah.
okay.
I was too
Um,
much ego to not be solo.
you were too what?
Too much ego to not be solo.
It's a very warm ego, though.
Yeah.
Um, will you play us a couple songs and then we'll come back and talk some more?
Okay, I forgot to ask you, how does this crowd feel about the occasional profanity?
They feel great about it.
Sometimes it's required. Sometimes it's required. So in this song I'll do first is James Madison, and the chorus is an actual quote by James Madison, the fourth president, which I read a long time ago and was really bothered by it for a long time and worked its way into a song. So, but there is a very intentional F bomb in here. Founding fathers, free spirit men, some grew hemp on the plantations. All had slaves that didn't free them. All had slaves and some fucked them. Jimmy James Madison didn't give two flips about anyone. Polk's manifest destiny didn't work out for the Cherokee. Jimmy James, he said, the purpose of the government is to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority. Two-party systems seem like one goal at the top, and the rest in rickety runs. We got the money, we got the guns, we got greed and idiocy, and embarrassment to everyone with any sense of decency. The purpose of the government is to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority. The purpose of the government is to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority. Prying perverts, police populations, prisons populate, prophets, predictions, politicians salivate. Ellsberg, Manning, Snowden, Davis, heroes and dissidents. We all could use a daily dose of civil disobedience. We all could use a daily dose of civil disobedience. We all could use a daily dose of civil disobedience. The purpose of the government is to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority. The purpose of the government is to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority. Dude. I see the dude comment from Anand. Ananayak. In my heart, Anand. So here's a song we were talking about Milwaukee. I grew up in Milwaukee. One of my best friends is watching. What up, cow poet? So here's a song. Sometimes I say I wrote this song in 10 minutes plus a lifetime. So this was initially written down in November 2014 when the grand jury in Ferguson, Missouri declined to press charges against the cop who killed Michael Brown Jr. And how many times has that happened since? So this is about all the things. And so here we go. My father grew up in Jim Crow, Tennessee, a sharecropper son, far from luxury. Moved up north in 1952, and a damn thing changed from his point of view. His point of view. Now I've been pulled over on a Shorewood shoulder, asked where you going, where you been. Ain't none of your business. Don't I look like an American? You're gonna think what you want now, don't you? I didn't know the side of the road was a court. Everything darker comes out in the light. We keep marching on, but our souls are tired. 'Cause here we are again, here we are again. A black man gone 'cause of the color of his skin. The color of his skin. I was grown and groomed in the Great Lakes Midwest, where politeness covers up years of repressed tight lips, tight asses, too slow to grow, hyper-segregated masses, and I had to go. I had to go. I seen the Rodney King riots in 1992, a black president, I seen that too, but ain't a damn thing changed from my point of view. Ain't a damn thing changed from my point of view. My point of view. Everything darker comes out in the light. We keep marching on, but our souls are tired. 'Cause here we are again, here we are again. A black child gone 'cause of the color of her skin. Everything darker comes out in the light. We keep marching on, but our souls are tired. 'Cause here we are again, here we are again. A black child gone 'cause of the color of the skin. The color of the skin. The color of our skin. The color of the skin.
Thank you. Well, those are powerful songs.
Cheery.
Your songs have always been powerful, and you've never been shy to be political. It's from the first time I heard you when you came to Boston. What's changed for you in those intervening 25 years? Is in your music and the way you approach songwriting? What feels different? What feels the same?
That we're still talking about the same old shit feels the same. That that I continue to be in this place of using my voice. I have I think my songs, many of them, not always, and sometimes they shouldn't be, but some have evolved into being less aggressive, and I have relied more on the content, the lyrics themselves to deliver the message and not necessarily, you know, strum a hole in my guitar to get the point across. Sometimes that's still absolutely just an involuntary part of the song, but I try to, I guess I try to be less in the beginning, kind of like when I'm also queer, when someone first comes out, they're like, "Hey, I'm queer. Everybody, here's a flag. I'm gay. Everybody, look, 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 I'm gay." And they're just so we're just so proud to claim our own identity and to share it with the world. And it's very, it can't, I guess I'm going to only speak for myself. It was very loud, and it was very, um, oh, just no beating around the bush. Like, here is what it is. You can't, dance around or not see me. And it kind of could be taken as, and in my songwriting, I think I felt like I was on a soapbox a little bit, and we need those. And I think just in my evolution as a writer and maybe just as a human being, that some of that softened, and I let go of my need um, to qualify every song, and try to explain, this is how this is important and this is why this is important. You're going to listen to this song that I wrote. Here it goes. I deleted that part and just let the song do it.
Hmm.
And not always, but some. And then I think that it snuck in. It sneaks in further to a listener when it's just you. One of my friends says, I was humming along to James Madison, and then one day I was like, what the fuck am I humming along to? And then paying attention to the lyrics. I like that. I like that. I like both approaches, and I like that I've been able to be on both sides, to do both things. That's what's changed.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, even early on, you always had humor to sort of temper or sweeten the medicine, maybe. Um, that's always been an attribute of yours. I'm curious. So I've been thinking about how to sort of articulate this question or get into this. So I have a gay child. I don't have a black child, or biracial child. I'm curious. When we arrived in the scene in Boston, I think it's probably fair to say, you correct me where I go off course, but it was kind of a heyday of feminist and especially gay female songwriting and fanship. And there were very outspoken uh, folks like Ani DeFranco, who, whether she identified, however she identified, she was embraced as part of the LGBTQ community. And certainly she grew a big fan base. Do you feel like you were received differently? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, can you dissect, like, you're at the intersection of a lot of things as a biracial gay woman. There's a lot of factors that um, have the potential to be marginalizing, or to put up obstacles and roadblocks. Are you able to sort of separate which was which, or if you were treated in a different way, or if audiences heard you differently?
Short answer, yes.
Okay.
um, Slightly longer answer is fuck yes, fuck shit. Um, Fucking A, what the fuck have I been talking about in therapy for? Yeah. So first, well, And again, I'm speaking from my perspective. One of the first things that I loved about Boston was on my very first visit, I saw women, queer couples holding hands walking down Mass Ave. And where I lived in Milwaukee, hadn't come out yet, so I was in the closet. I had a lot of anxiety about being in the closet, largely because I went to Lutheran schools and I had a lot of negative stuff drilled into me. And Milwaukee is more on the conservative sides of town. You didn't see queer couples holding hands. The queer clubs were in the sketchy parts of town. And so my very first visit, I saw queer couples holding hands, and I thought, I need to be here. And I moved 6 months later after my first visit. And I had a girlfriend, my first serious girlfriend, and I started my own coming out process. When I moved to Boston, I decided that I didn't want to start my new life on a lie, and I started to come out. I kind of came out one by one to everyone I knew. And so that part of me wasn't the first part of my politics, the first part of my awakening. I guess it is all intersected. It was a collision of coming out to myself, recognizing how much racial trauma I had experienced growing up in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and Waukesha, a smaller city outside of Milwaukee, which is total gross Trumpville now. And so the very beginning of my political songwriting dealt with race, because that was the first thing that I was able to face, I guess, myself. And then coming out of my sexuality didn't necessarily enter my songwriting immediately, but within a few years after moving to Boston, it did. And I would say that I think I did find a niche. I did feel embraced. I felt embraced from my politics to a certain point. And then I feel like something, and I wish I could know what it was. I feel like some things changed. And even at the same time as I evolved into a politically outspoken person, I was getting messages from venues around Boston, from old fans in Milwaukee that had never heard me be political. And they would say things like, no one wants to hear that, Pamela. Like, sing what you used to sing. And venues, I saved some postcards from venues. I said, you're too much. You're too much for our space. Good luck to you, though. And I felt walls. I felt doors. Ironically, this series is called Opening Doors, and I felt that doors were not necessarily opening to me on the scene past a certain point. I watched a lot of my friends get record deals, managers, agents, and stuff like that, and it wasn't happening to me. And I wasn't, well, what makes me different from most of my friends? The way I look, my queerness, my outspoken lyrics. So what is it? Is it those things? Is it not? And some things felt very frustrating like that, but some things were still moving in a positive way. And I got it in my head that, well, if the doors aren't going to open, I'm going to fucking kick them down. Like, fuck you. Like, I came all the fuck way from Wisconsin to have a career, and that's what I'm going to do. Why I chose white bread New England, Folk City Central, I don't know. Maybe just because that's where Peter moved and I followed him. Maybe if he'd moved to New York, I would have ended up in New York. So I'll blame Peter.
Then he moved away.
Yeah, well, cool things can happen. Yeah. Like, another thing that seemed to happen was that in probably by 99, 2000, I came out. And I came out publicly. I put it in all my press. It's on my website ever since. And it seemed like soon after that, all the folk festival gigs dried up for about a decade. And then I played Michigan Women's Festival and other queer festivals. And I can't. I can only say this happened, and then this seemed to happen, and this happened, and then this happened, and then like a decade later, things come back around. So
One of the for me, one of the things that makes this series feel necessary for white audiences and for me is that when you hear any one story, it's so easy to dismiss things as, well, that's, that maybe you just weren't. But when you hear the same stories over and over again, and those patterns, it makes it a lot harder to dismiss, right? There's always people you can point to. I'm sure there are people who would watch this video and say, well, Tracy Chapman was black and queer at the same time, and she was the biggest, hottest ticket in town. But another thing that comes up a lot is this idea that in white liberalism there's kind of a quota, like we know diversity is important, we want to check that box, but once it's checked, we don't have room for two. Did you
yeah,
feel that? Were there other black performers at the time that you felt like you were competing for that one spot for? Maybe that's the question.
I don't think I felt that, but I don't think I saw other black performers. Well, actually, I don't want to generalize because we could all form a band together, the all of us. Uh,
All the black performers,
all the black folk singers, we could be a band. We only need
one band.
one van to drive around. um,
I would go see a show though.
some of the performers I'm thinking of did not have politics as part of their presentation at the time, so they
Well,
were
that's
safer.
my other question. Yeah.
They were safer. And I have a very mean joke about a black performer that I won't name, but I say, been making white folk comfortable for like 25 years now, and um, that's a pretty mean thing for me to say. And but that's kind of the reality that I saw, that I still feel like I kind of experienced. And I also want to say that I had all of these feelings, and no one's ever going to say, yeah, we didn't book you because we're racist. Like, who's ever going to say that? But I did have two straight white male managers from the Boston scene who managed very big time artists. And at separate points, they came up to me and apologized to me for not including me in XYZ, you know, opportunities. And they still didn't present any opportunities at that moment, and they didn't apologize in front of anyone. It was one on one, both instances. But it was affirming, at the very least. It was affirming that I wasn't completely imagining what I thought that I was seeing and experiencing. So satisfying in that way, but enraging and on many levels at the same time.
I imagine so. You've whatever that rage is, and or whatever else brings you to therapy, I think you put it in songs in an effective way. Yeah, I mean, that is a part of it, right? This is another big question I've sort of been thinking about leading up to this interview is, you know, when we look for diversity, are we only looking for sort of polite diversity, the kind that doesn't make folks feel uncomfortable? And I mean, your newest project is called Pamela Means and the Reparations. You don't pull your punches on any of that. And I was really struck when I wrote you about being in this series. And we've done, I've asked you to do a couple of things recently over this past couple of years. And I really wanted to talk to you in this series, but I was really struck with your first email that you said it's refreshing to get an email saying, I'd like to talk to you about race and hear your politics, because I think you said the same thing you just said you heard early on in your career, that venues still are saying you're too much for us. Is that right?
Well, no, since the 2016 election, ironically, they're like, "Oh, hey, wait, don't you do the you wait, you yeah, can you come and do this rally? Can you come and sing? Yeah, don't you have some songs? You only talk about this stuff." And it's like, "Yes, fuck." Been doing this for years. Many of us have. You just want to fucking listen now. Fuck you. But yeah, okay, yeah, I'll be there. What time? Because we need the work and the message still
Yeah.
needs to be spread. But yeah, it's a lot of frustration. And so I suppose things got so bad that Trump was elected that the white liberals, had give themselves a little more wiggle room to hear more edgy truth. And but yeah, I've been doing it the whole time. Been doing this for years, and I suppose, depending on how things go in the next few years, that I'll continue to have work, or it will dry up again. So I wouldn't mind if I never had to sing another political song if we all had peace on Earth. But we all know that things move too slowly, and too many people are too hard-hearted for too long.
Will you sing another one? Since you just said you wouldn't want to. Um, I want to hear one more song, if you will, and then I want to talk a little bit about the cause organization that you chose to split money with tonight, and we are honored to be joined by the executive director of that organization called Arise for Social Justice. So
Yeah.
we'll get to that after one more song. And I put up one banner already. I'm going to put up another banner. To be clear to folks, the way this series works, the Melrose UU Church anti-racism team, let me see, I got a little banner here, from my hometown, had come to me last year and were interested in doing a series of some kind. And we landed on this format. And the way it works is that the church and the members of the church, through their donations, are supporting artists with a reasonable market rate online fee, but it's never really. When Pamela said this song took me, what did you say? 3 days in a lifetime?
10
That
minutes.
10 minutes in a lifetime. That's the way it works. So when we contribute to artists, we're paying for a lifetime of expertise and hard work. So I'm going to put up the banner again with Pamela's info, and you guys should know that that money that you donate will go half to her and half to Arise for Social Justice, which we'll learn more about in a minute. All right, Pamela,
Okay.
I'm going away.
Heads up, this is a shorter song, but it's the newest one I have. And last summer, when all the protests were happening, why weren't they still happening this summer? But while the protests were happening, I was reluctant to be inspired for a little bit because I thought maybe it's just trendy. Things seem trendy to be politically correct or on the right side of something. And then short term memory span, USA, we move on to the next thing. But I was inspired that the protests kept going. And, energy has waned, but conversations are still alive. Legislations are still being presented. And so, anyway, this is a thing in all my rage and tears and frustration and feeling like, oh, I gotta write something. I tried. This one was days and days of trying to write something, and it was all crap. And then one morning, this thing popped out, and it didn't sound like any of the other stuff that I had been trying to write for days. But sometimes that's what happens. So this is not. It's called "Time to Tear It All Down." My country, 'tis of thee. What's the matter with you? Handing out liberty for the privileged few. No justice for the rest of us. You've been crooked and cruel. Time to tear it all down and build something new. Time to tear it all down and build something true. We've been saying it for years, now the video shows it. Reason for rage and tears and fears, now everybody knows it. No more thoughts and prayers, rhetoric is through. Truth and reconciliation, reparations are due. My country, 'tis thee, let me holler at you. Plenty opportunity for the privileged few. Roadblock for black, brown, poor. You've been crooked and cruel. Time to tear it all down and build something new. Time to tear it all down and build something true.
Yes, indeed. So good to hear you. It's been
Thanks.
too long.
It's weird to smile after a song that's about something so horrible. Like, maybe it's my nervous smile. But there's a song that's like says what it has to say, but it's not like, "Brrr!" It's just like, "Brrr."
Yeah. Yeah. I like that you get in and out on it too. There's something powerful about the length of it. You know?
Thanks.
I find as I get older with writing that I want to pare stuff down more and more and just strip everything away until there's like a few words left.
Yeah. Succinct.
I want to bring in Tanisha Arena
Yes.
from Arise from Social Justice.
Good.
Hi, Tanisha.
Hi.
Hey, Tanisha.
Thanks
Hi,
for joining
Pamela.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. So,
Well,
for
yeah.
those who don't know, my name is Tanisha Arena, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the executive director of Arise for Social Justice. We are a grassroots nonprofit located in Springfield, Massachusetts, and we've been around for about 36 years now. And we focus on the rights of poor and low-income folks, which at this point, I'm saying these are the rights of human folks because of what that looks like, and it's also inclusivity in what we're doing, because if someone doesn't identify as poor, which that's also a thing, they might not ever feel like anything in Arise is for them. So we focus on housing and economic justice, homelessness, environmental justice, and criminal justice, and my personal not favorite, white supremacy and racism, which is the underpinnings of all of the things that I just mentioned. It's the belly of the beast. And again, what this looks like and what we're seeing, I mean, the last song that Pamela sang, there was such energy, and we see these cycles, in nonprofit work, like what's the cool thing? It was environmental justice until the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd. And then it was, oh my gosh, we have to do this because now the other half of our country can see the things that Black and brown folks have been saying since 1619, maybe. And these are some of the conversations that we definitely need to have. They're hard conversations, but just because something is hard doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, right? And that time is now. And also keeping that energy, because Black and brown folks can't opt out of the experiences that we're having in the way that white folks can opt out of keeping the energy of pushing against the experiences that we're having.
Right.
I have a friend that talks about, it's not white fragility. It's the resiliency piece that's missing, the underdeveloped muscle flexing of staying in something past that discomfort and not just, oh, this is too much, too hard, I'm leaving. And that's how we keep this momentum and start to tear down these systems and institutions, because white supremacy and racism hurts white people too, because it'll have you doing things and subscribing to things that really internally aren't right, but okay, this is what it calls for. And these also aren't conversations about invoking shame and guilt and all those other things, because that's not helpful. That's not going to drive these conversations, right? Like, we know these terrible things happen. What I'm asking you to do is acknowledge the privilege that you have, because even if somebody is being anti-racist, white privilege doesn't miss you. And that's a critical piece. Accepting that it's there and asking, how can you use that for good? Right? Because white folks do need to gather up other white folks. White folks need to name that I do benefit from these systems that oppress others, maybe even others that you love and care about in community and at home, and do something about that. That's the work that I do, in a way that it shows up, at Arise. And just also, I live in this body, right? I'm a Black woman, queer identified, who lives in the United States of America, and that puts me at the bottom sometimes of this social structure. But this is how I show up. My shirt today says, "No racism formed against me shall prosper." It's a testimony to everything that's going on, that's happening, and that resiliency that I've had to develop as a Black person. So there's no fragility here. And these are the things that we need well-meaning white folks to do, and even the not so well-meaning white folks to do, because this is work for everybody to do. These are the systems and institutions that we have, and we can create something better. And this is one of those spaces that we can do that.
Tanisha, I want to come back to asking you some about the specific work of Arise and how you put funding towards the work. But I want to pick up on, I think for me, the key piece of anti-racism work among white people, and that lack of, what did you call it?
Resiliency
or persistence. That I feel like the thing that I've learned most in the last couple of years is that white folks will not be long-term committed to anti-racism until we're able to internalize how toxic it is for us. As long as we think about fighting institutional racism as something we're doing for other people, there's always going to be other things that are more important or just as important. I'll do it in my free time. And then there's a lot of other things that we need to do in our free time if we have a conscience, like think about the environment and think about other folks that are marginalized in other ways and think about our disastrous governmental decisions and all of these things. But the systemic racism, it twists us up in knots, right? And it comes out in all sorts of actions. That phrase, opening doors, I talked about it with my friend Reggie Harris when we were starting, and I was, almost tempted to call it untying knots. But either way, the doors that we're opening aren't just for other folks. That we're opening doors in ourselves because they're closed. We grow up in a society that teaches us to close those doors and avoid the conversations that make us go to those uncomfortable places, because it makes it churns everything up, right? If we ask these deep questions about how we got here, why does my family have a house and another family doesn't, it undermines all of sort of assumptions and things we were taught from a young age, and that's hard work. But we have to feel some ownership of it, and I think that's been my experience with white folks in anti-racism is that until it becomes clear that, like, I'm doing this for myself, not for you, we will go away and we'll go back to sleep. But getting to that place and then staying there is hard. Pamela, how did you find Arise for Social Justice? Why did you pick this organization? Have you had connections with them in the past?
I've not been connected to them in the past, but I heard about it, and I was going to choose a larger, more, commonly heard of organization, Black Lives Matter, Planned Parenthood, but that's also generic. And, I thought about, I asked some friends, and a public defender friend of mine said, Arise. I was like, yeah. And immediately, because of all the work that you're doing, at Arise, and that it's local and it's grassroots. And again, because of all the different intersecting issues that you work on at the same time. And I reached out last week and I met with Tanisha, and we're starting a connection directly so I would like to be more directly involved from here forward. But yeah, I appreciate that. It's something down the street. It's really, you can see what it's doing.
Yeah.
And it's not, oh, let's throw my money into the air. But no, this place is doing this thing, these things to help this region and the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the region is Springfield. How wide? I mean, thanks, Pamela. I think you nailed it. The local grassroots work is where real work often actually happens, right? Tanisha, can you tell us about some of the projects you're currently involved in?
Sure. A big one that was struck down in April of this year was the building of a biomass plant. And that was a 12-year battle of a community saying no. And Springfield is a designated environmental justice community or environmental sacrifice zone, however you want to look at it, which means that there have been, decisions made that have caused harm to the residents, who are primarily Black and brown. More than half of the residents have asthma or other respiratory issues. Folks are walking around with inhalers. They can't go outside. The air quality is bad. We're also in a valley. Up until a couple months ago, we were the asthma capital of the United States. Not the state of Massachusetts, but the United States. We're not anymore. Shout out to Allentown, Pennsylvania. That's now inherited #1, but we shouldn't have a list like that anyway, right? Because we all need to breathe clean air. And there was a 90-mile radius where this smoke was going to go, because the smoke doesn't know to stay in the smoking section. 90 miles from Springfield included Boston, Connecticut, where I'm from, parts of New York, New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont. And we would have all just been jockeying for that #1 spot with this pollution spewing biomass plant that was going to be in Springfield, ground zero, but it was to provide energy to one of the wealthier communities in the eastern part of the state. And it took 12 years of a designated environmental justice community saying, no, we don't want this here. Why do you want to put this here? And it was touted as clean energy because they were going to burn wood pellets. And we could plant new trees. That was the theory. But that's not really how it works, right? Burning anything is not clean energy. I think that's something we all learned in elementary school. So that was one thing. And again, it's finally dead, I think. But other things that we are working on, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. There's a housing crisis because there aren't these protections anymore. There's legislation that's being, voted on at the local level to protect tenants and landlords, because both of those interests. Coming up on October 2nd is a rally in Northampton about reproductive rights and what's happening in Texas with the Supreme Court. And we're literally watching as something like Roe v. Wade be debated again in this kind of way. So if you care about those things, which you should, female-bodied, male-bodied, Northampton, what's happening at the border and what we literally just saw with Border Patrol agents beating Black folks, and what that looks like and what it means historically today, because past is present. And conversations now about ending the filibuster, because that is also a relic of slavery, and expanding the Supreme Court. And these are national things, but the local things, like all politics are local. Register to vote, know what's happening in your primaries and your midterm elections, because those things will have dire consequences in our national election. Because right now we have a democratically controlled House, Senate, and presidency, and we can't get things done. And we're just a couple of votes shy of things going the other way. This is a time for diligence, for that perseverance and resiliency. And believe me, it is exhausting because there's so many different issues. And at Arise on the local level, we're helping folks who are going through it in these ways. It's like, okay, so I live here. I have mold in my apartment, which has health implications. Mold's not part of the sanitary code, but we're working on that, because they literally just closed the courthouse because they suspected it had mold. And it's like, if it's not safe enough for judges and attorneys to be in there for 8 hours a day, how do we expect people to live in these conditions? So that's something that's going to be a local push. What housing looks like. When folks are showing up, I'm getting evicted, or I've been evicted, or I'm homeless. And these are the decisions like, can we get people into stabilized housing? Do we have the resources to do that? And one of the things that's been really important, there's not a lot of bureaucratic red tape at Arise. We get to operate in a way that's outside of larger institutions and organizations. Forward-facing Arise is not an agency. Upstairs, when I'm doing paperwork, it is, but to the community, no. We meet people where they're at. We want to know your story, what has affected you. We've hidden people from DCF because that wasn't what they needed to actually have support and to make changes in their life. Like, we had a young mom who was fleeing from domestic violence, and that's why she was living in her car. And then it was like, why aren't your kids at school? And we're calling DCF. She just needed time to get the paperwork so she could get stably housed. She didn't need DCF in her life. So no, we don't know where she at. And then those couple of days went by, and then she was able to get stably housed, and DCF becomes a non-issue, and her kids are back at school. I'm looking at what are the systems and institutions that are supposed to help that actually cause more harm? And can we come up with other ways of helping people without all this extra? And an examination of what's required, because she didn't need DCF. She just needed those few days to get her paperwork, fleeing domestic violence. And why should fleeing domestic violence turn into now my kids are in DCF care and I've got to go through hoops to get my kids back? So like I said, it's a lot. This is what it looks like, though.
Thank you for your work, and also for articulating so well the way that all of these things that are, we could, it's so easy to think of these as separate problems, but they're all intertwined, and one issue, it snowballs. And you guys are clearly doing frontline work to get in at the start and try to untangle stuff. I want to get back to some music and chat with Pamela. Thank you so much for joining us, Tanisha.
Absolutely.
I'm going to put the website directly of Arise in the comments too, so folks can go check out that website and see and learn more. Thank you so much. It was an honor to have you come join us. I'm looking forward to learning more about Arise myself, and I hope we'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tanisha.
All right.
Whew. How are you, Pamela?
I've got all kinds of thoughts, and I'm thinking, one of the first things that grabbed my attention when I looked up Arise was that it's a poor people's campaign. And first time I ever heard that phrase was reading about Martin Luther King and his work. And the fact, again, the frustrating, infuriating, maddening fact of how slowly progress can come, and that these very same conversations, even much older than Martin Luther King, that we're still having them. Lately I've been feeling at once inspired for the future and near despair, like just completely enraged. And yeah, that's all I say. And I want to say that as a country, the United States, oh man, needs a lot of help, and needs the fact that South Africa and their history of apartheid, and they went through the process of truth and reconciliation to, even though there's still issues, but as a country they said, okay, the only way forward is through, and to talk about this and to shine a light and to talk about these things. It's the only way we're going to heal and move forward. And how did South Africa beat us to that conversation? What the fuck? It's probably not such a mystery, but it's a shame. It's absolutely shameful, and so I hope that.
You know,
Yeah.
I studied in Zimbabwe my junior year of college. It was 94. And that was right as the first South African free elections were happening. And I was so struck by the Reconciliation Commission, the way they, confronted their, unbelievably painful past in a direct way, and said we need to have a national conversation. This is something we've never brought ourselves to do in this country. And we have an entire half of our country we have a half of our country that continues to deny that any of that matters, that it all was in the past, and that now we're all colorblind, and that's the way to be. It's so infuriating that I find I can't even sort of engage. For me, what I've found more inspiring is thinking about all the deficits that white liberals continue to have also. And at least there's a conversation that I think can happen. If you're willing to start the conversation, then there's the possibility of that conversation going deeper. As a lifelong progressive liberal, the amount of things that I never understood or saw about systemic racism, because it wasn't presented to me, but also because I wasn't ready to go there or willing to open those doors for myself. I guess that gives me some hope of progress. Some of the direct work that I'm involved in my local community around racial justice, but also in children's music, is another thing that gives me some hope, because I'm seeing a level of persistent commitment in myself, but in others too, that I haven't always seen. But playing music and talking about this stuff with kids, there is something there. Folks who know my music more know that I've been doing this project. I'll put up a banner. This project with Reggie Harris called Race and Song. This is the program that actually inspired this program, because Reggie and I have been doing this for a year and a half now for students from like kindergarten through high school. And it's been really powerful. And, we talk about personal history. We talk about being in our skins. We talk about national history. But more than anything, we're just modeling what it is to have a conversation about race between two people of different skin colors in America. And I wanted to continue those conversations in a more adult realm. And it feels equally necessary, but I have to say, like, when you talk about that despair, there's something about working with kids that somehow helps the burden a little bit less. When people haven't completely dug in their heels or formed all of their world opinions and are open to the possibility, there's a vulnerability and a willingness to sort of, when we come in and talk about race, kids sit up in a way. I've, been working with kids for 15, 20 years now, and like they lean in to these conversations. They're like hungry for it. And you can see that there's a feeling of like, once we get started and once we go to some uncomfortable places, there's this sense of like, oh, these guys aren't going to like come and just talk bullshit to us. And you can see that the kids have this, like, they sense that this is necessary, that it's important, and they want to be involved in it. But it's really tricky because it's not happening in public schools. I think it's happening some places in public schools, but we have states across our country that are actively outlawing the concept of even talking about race. That gives me despair.
Mm-hmm.
Would you play another song? I think maybe that would help. Maybe if you play one and then I'll play one,
Okay.
we can lift our spirits a little bit here. And then we'll end with a little more talk. Okay.
I agree with you with the young children, with the young generation, the children. I do feel largely inspired. And there was a lot of young people on those rallies last summer, a lot of people in their 20s.
Sure.
Boy, I sound old saying that people in their 20s are young people. Delete.
They they are. They sure are. I
But
know. I call
yeah,
them kids, and my kids go, "Dad, they're in their 20s," and I'm like, "Yeah, they're kids."
I have friends whose kids, when they were just a few years ago in uh, preschool, kindergarten, all like a couple kids were having an argument outside, going saying, "Boys too can have vaginas." So I think we're in a good spot. That's light years ahead from where I come from. Um,
Oh,
did I go away? What happened? Okay.
sorry, I keep removing myself.
um, I keep thinking about what you said, Mook, about that white liberals have to feel themselves, or have, however you said it, have to have it has to come home, I guess. And that's kind of true about everything. I mean, humans are fucking annoying. Like, we don't want to do anything that's hard. It's hard. It hurts. It's painful. But I think it's true about most things. Most traumas and tragedies have come home and activated people, and thankfully, a lot of people, white-skinned people, who maybe didn't have to have a trauma to wake up. So, whatever. I'm rambling, but this is called Hands Up. Fairly self-explanatory. And it's about, I felt I had a little anxiety when I wrote this song because at the time I had been working on writing a very overt Black Lives Matter anthemic kind of song. And and then the massacre at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando happened. So this is June 2016. And I was in a fetal position that night in despair and upset about all the things. And this song started to come together. And the first verse talks about coming out. And I felt a little, well, this song is mostly about Black Lives Matter and gun legislation, and but I talk about being queer. But at the Pulse massacre, a bunch of queer people got killed, and I am all those things. So we are all those things, whether or not you see it in the mirror as immediately as some of us do. So anyway, intersection. Hands up, don't shoot. I'm tough, not bulletproof. Gonna love out loud, not afraid. Gonna march down Main in the Pride Parade. No closets, no shame. Yes, love, no hate. Hands up, don't shoot. I'm tough, not bulletproof. chamber, sent to kill a stranger by a hateful, deranged figure. It's not the guns, it's the trigger. It's the bullet in the chamber, sent to kill a stranger by a hateful, deranged figure. Hands up, don't shoot. We're tough and not bulletproof. Hands up, don't shoot. We're tough and not bulletproof. Ho, hey, NRA, how many souls did you kill today? Ho, hey, NRA, how many deaths you facilitate? Ho, hey, NRA, how many souls did you kill today? Ho, hey, NRA, how many hearts did you break today? Hands up, don't shoot. We're tough, not bulletproof. Hands up, don't shoot. We're tough, not bulletproof.
It's a great song. I'm sorry to have posted banners at the beginning that I didn't mean to post, that were kind of from something earlier that
I missed it.
that you said. You said something about boys saying boys can have vaginas.
Vaginas. Vaginas.
It, there was a good vaginas comment. It didn't
yeah.
need to be right at the beginning of your hands up song. I'll post this one up though. This is one of the things you do is teach guitar, yeah?
Yeah. Hi, Missy. Guitar, bass, mando, ukulele, dulcimer one time.
You taught it one time.
We got strings. Let's do it.
Your guitar playing, one of the things about you is that your guitar playing has continued to improve, and you've traveled with it, right? I mean, Anand Nayak, who's been commenting, you and he, I know, were doing some jazz-oriented stuff, and that's one of the many things you've been doing. I know you did I don't know if you recorded it, but you were doing some performances of of Abbey Road, right? Were you doing all the songs?
Yes, I memorized the entire Beatles album, Abbey Road. And so now it's a thing that I do. So it's one of my projects. So it's a show. And I had intended to spend 2020 doing Abbey Road in as many places as I could, and also to start touring with the Reparations. I released an album anyway, Reparations album, and then 2020 and the pandemic. And Anand was the very first musician I met when I moved to the Pioneer Valley to Northampton. And Anand, vaginas.
That's just so. We'll just keep that up.
He's a tremendous musician, guitar player, singer, and he also plays bass. And I think he was teaching himself upright at the time we met. And I had a dream to have a jazz trio. And I met him just at that time, and we started working together. So he's the first musician I played with out here in Western Mass. He's too busy for me now, bruh.
He's pretty busy. I play a lot with him too. And, I was thinking about your guitar work. So Anand and I have done a lot of co-producing and co-writing around writing for kids and families. One of the songs we wrote on a previous album was called "You Might Be a Girl," and Anand specifically wanted to write a verse about the concept of the song was, if you do this, you might be a girl, and it was right, like blowing up stereotypes. And I remember that he wanted to make a specific point about playing like lead guitar. Um, it's just, you know, I hope that in those feelings of despair, I hope your therapist is saying this to you and the loved ones around you, that you're an amazing model. I mean, you're modeling a lot of things for younger generations of people through your songwriting, through your presence and willingness to be outspoken, and even through your just being a badass guitar player. I think there's probably a lot of young girls out there that when they see you pick up a guitar go, I can shred too.
Oh. Thank you, Mook. Yeah. I don't feel that. And sometimes someone says something like you just did, and I think, oh, I want that, and I have no choice with how I proceed. If I were to ignore all these thoughts and to neglect bringing them into my work, I would not be able to look in the mirror. I would not be able to sleep or have any integrity. So, that's why I've been out here doing it anyway, even when people didn't want to listen. And I never expected to be a teacher, and I'm very grateful that that is something that I can do. And I think I'm pretty good at it. And part of that is because, tying into what you just said, I have a motto as a teacher, and that's to teach the way I wish I had been taught, especially when I have young students, especially young girls, teenagers, to tell them, if you do this, if you practice this and you learn a little bit about this, it's not that fun, but then you can shred and you can do your own solos and you can sound smart and, hang and, hold your own in every situation. And no one told me that. I had to stumble into it. So I like to, I wish someone told me when I was 14, if you practice your dumb scales, you can start playing your own solos right away. And I didn't want anything to do with that for a very long time. So now I do.
It's a big thing having an adult tell you that you can do something. You know, I do. I perform the song "Freight Train" a lot, and I talk about the story of Elizabeth Cotton, and she was an amazing finger picking guitar player, and all the adults in her life told her to put that guitar away. And she didn't have models, and it took her until she was in her 70s to be discovered by the Seeger family, and then to sort of have a last ditch share her gifts with the world. But I'm really struck by that. It comes up over and over again when you work with kids too. Is this group that I'm part of, and I'm going to be interviewing a couple of folks later in the season from this group called Family Music Forward. It's about representation in children's music, and how important it is to see people who look like you up on stage, but that just goes how important it is to see people who look like you stand up in front of your classroom. Here in our group here in town, I've heard several Black members of our community say, I went through my entire 12 years of education, I never had a Black teacher. It's so essential for Black kids to see themselves modeled, but it's so essential for white kids to see Black models in those places too, or women shredding on guitar. Those stereotypes come through all of us. So I want to, we're at 9:15. I want to give you a break for a couple of minutes because you have not even left the screen. So have a drink of water. I'm going to play a song, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a last couple of minutes.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Right. Okay. Another female shredder in our audience is my old friend Lori Geltman, who is also a guitar teacher out in LA now. Another badass songwriter and player. I was going to play one of the more kid-oriented songs, but after Pamela's all this powerful music, I can't bring myself to be like the chirpy guy, so I'm going to get dark too. This song is called Cloud Splitter. A father farmer far out in the hills, rich in family, poor in dollar bills, struggling with the call of heaven's host, fighting off the demons and the ghosts. Heard a cry from far off in the south. He turned his gaze away from his own house, found the battle he was born to fight, took his sons and left that very night. The current conflict raging in the west, Lawrence, Kansas next to face the test. The father and the sons come overland. Within a year there's blood on all their hands. Every man's affected when he kills. Death's a mighty bitter tasting pill. But John Brown heard the whisper in his ear, now bring to the South what you've done here. Yeah, Cloud Splitter, open up the skies, make this country open up its eyes. Well, Cloud Splitter, what's it gonna take? How's a nation fix a great mistake? October 16th, 1859, 21 men waiting for his sign to cross the wide Potomac to a shore where slavery's hold was cold as it was sure. Harper's Ferry fell without a fight, and 60 prisoners taken on the night. A fully loaded federal armory, but no slaves came to claim the weaponry. By next day's end, the army shot them down. They captured some, including old John Brown, dragged them to a local court in chains. 2 months later, all of them was hanged. On the stand, John Brown addressed the court, his right hand on the Bible for support. Remember, those in bonds is bound with them. I'm bound by laws of God, not laws of men. Yeah, Cloud Splitter, open up the sky, make this country open up its eyes. Well, Cloud Splitter, what's it gonna take? How's a nation fix a great mistake? Yeah, Cloud Splitter, open up the sky, make this country open up its eyes. Within 2 years, the Civil War had begun. Many reasons, John Brown being one. And though Abe Lincoln never did intend, he finished what Brown started in the end. Washington is on my dollar bill, Jefferson's memorial on the hill. John Brown gave his life for our great sin. The textbooks almost never mention him. Racial fear still fuels this nation's fire. The smoke is thick and always getting higher. And up in heaven, John Brown sits and cries. Come back, John, and open up our eyes. Yeah, cloud splitter, open up the skies. Make this country open up its eyes. Well, cloud splitter, what's it gonna take? Has a nation fixed a great mistake? Yeah, cloud splitter, open up the sky. Make this country open up its eyes. I hope I didn't blow out the microphone. Hey, before I bring Pamela back in, I want to share a couple of dates. Our next guest in the series will be Kelly Hall Tompkins. Kelly is a virtuoso solo violinist. She was the lead fiddler in the latest Broadway revival of Fiddler on the Roof. She is world-renowned, and it is an incredible honor that she agreed to come talk to me. And we're going to explore a very different genre than we have. We're going to talk about the world of classical music and how that genre intersects with race. Then we're sort of skipping November, Thanksgiving time, and we'll have an early December show with Briar and Joe Siemens are a couple from Seattle. Briar sings old-timey stuff, jazz stuff. Joe is a multi-instrumentalist, and the two of them are involved in a anti-racism project through music called the Rhapsody Project, where they are educators and musicians. I'm really excited to talk with them, and actually Joe is going to be teaching one of their Face the Music anti-racism music classes online. I'm going to be posting about that, and I will be attending classes myself. Then in January, I have Tom Prasada Rao and Leah Morris are two fantastic songwriters from the DC area. Tom's song about George Floyd called $20 Bill was one of the most powerful songs I've heard in the last couple of years. And Leah has written all kinds of music, much of which has been played in our own Unitarian Universalist Church in the last several years. They're fantastic. It's going to be fun to talk to them. And then the last show we have booked for now is on February 20th. These are friends of mine from the world of family music. Shine and Saul Paul are both part of the Family Music Forward Anti-Racism Coalition that I mentioned, working in the children's music space. And both of them are great at what they do, and I'm really excited to talk with them about the state of family music, the projects that we've been working on together, and what's happening over there. And now I'm going to bring Pamela back in just like that. Hey.
Great song, Luke.
Thanks, friend. I don't want to keep you much longer than 9:30 because we're so old we have to go to bed. Drink tea and stuff. It's been so nice talking with you, and there's so much more that I feel like I would love to explore. We had these shared experiences in the folk music scene in Boston, but we obviously have very different experiences too. And you and I did a show. The one show I remember doing, I asked you to play with me at Johnny D's back in 2000.
Yeah, I think you're on my album from that.
Really? You put that stuff on an album?
A live version of Maggie's Farm Is because Chandler Travis is on it, and I think you're probably on it. So
Wow.
yeah,
Is there any royalties for that, or
I should probably get you like a latte.
I'll take it. That show ended up being a precursor to the show of kind of covers and exploring American music. But I feel very nostalgic thinking back to that time. But it also makes me so aware of like how different I was 20 years ago. Um, we were so young.
Yeah, no shit.
It's nice to think that maybe we learned things along the way. Um, that seems like if there's anything we're here to do, it's to keep learning, even as our brains like calcify and it gets harder to learn things.
Yeah, I didn't plan it, but I stopped touring for a long stretch because I went into therapy to deal with. I had a lot of loss. We've all had a lot of loss, but I had a lot of loss in a short span of time, and just thought, well, maybe I need to pause and self-reflect and do some introspection and examine. I was well aware that I was a walking ball of rage, but I hadn't really dug that deep because I didn't think it was necessary. Obvious why I'm a ball of rage. And but I stopped, and what was the it was the process of beginning that intense, deeply internal work that made me realize that I couldn't keep going and I needed to pause. And the point being that I still have all the rage, but I have more love and compassion for myself and for the world and for the ignorance of the world that is so maddening and so hurtful. Um, I have a little bit, I don't have tolerance or patience for it, but I have some compassion for others that have yet to take on that journey. So the tying into what you just said, I feel like I put down my touring for a stretch, which was bittersweet, and maybe I'll pick it up again at that extensive level. But what I traded for it was to become a better human being and to be at a greater peace with myself. And I think I hope that I exude some of that inner peace that I have finally claimed.
You know, I didn't know you well enough to sort of see the ball of rage. You always exuded humor and warmth to me, but we don't necessarily allow ourselves to be vulnerable in those ways in front of everybody. I
Yeah.
think it's another great act of modeling to be willing to talk about it because, this is another thing that we don't talk about is I think especially in this age of social media, we're all sort of putting our best selves out there. And when part of the reason you're on social media is because it's part of your work is you need to get people out to see what you're doing and learn about your projects. It makes it all the more those of us who are kind of half business people on social media. I think the pressure to sort of always be like everything's great, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not in our country, and this trauma that we've all been through these last couple of years. I don't think anybody can get out of that unscathed. Um, so thanks for being here and being willing to get a little vulnerable and uncomfortable so people at home can wiggle in their pants.
Yeah. I'm very
That's what it's all
comfortable.
about.
I'm very comfortable with my vulnerability and saying things that make others uncomfortable. Yeah.
I'm glad you are. Thanks for joining me, Pamela.
Thanks, Moot. Thanks for doing this.
Love you, buddy.
Love you too, pal.
All right.
All right.
I'm going to put up a final banner here. This is to tell you who brought this to you. Our producer on this series, who's been working furiously behind the scene, is Stacy Babb. She has been my partner in crime, and she's wonderful. And thank you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Melrose and the anti-racism team for kicking this thing off and funding, helping support our artists. I will put one more time, if I can manage to do it. I may not be able to actually get the comment, so I'll do it after the broadcast. I will say, put Pamela's PayPal info in. You can watch this even after the fact, and you can continue to contribute to Pamela, which will also support Arise for Social Justice. It is just after 9:30, so I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. Thank you for joining us, folks, and I'll see you next month for Kelly Hall Tompkins. Good night.